Hey everyone, Eran Stern here, welcoming you to Stern Effects, where you can learn how to use the built-in CC particle world effect to create particles in front and behind an object. So particle obscuration is where particles can be generated around 3D layers, or in other words, being obscured by an image. And this is usually a function of a third-party plugin such as Particular or maybe Stardust. Now, if you have access to these tools, you may already use this feature. And I am certainly a big fan of both plugins and use them quite a lot. But what if you don't have access to these tools and still need to create the same look? Well, just stay here and continue watching, and I'll show you how to achieve the same effect using the built-in CC particle world effect that ships with After Effects. So before getting into the particles themselves, I just want to show you the starting point of this composition where I've hidden few of the layers, and I'm just going to press spacebar to preview what we have so far. So we have this close-up of an ice cube, on top of it a guitarist and its shadow. And first I just want to show you how I've created the shadow. I think you will appreciate it because these are just few effects, regular built-in effects. So I'll switch off everything and then I'll select and open them and I'll turn them on one by one. So we are starting with the slant effect, and this is the resolution of this one. On top of it, I'm adding a displacement map using the ice as a displacement layer. So let's close those two. And then I'm adding the transform effect to raise the shadow up so it will touch the feet. Then I have a directional blur just to blur it a touch. And on top of everything, I'm adding the circle effect, which generates a small circle to hide the gap between the shadow and the shoe. Alright, so this is it for this part. The guitarist itself is isolated in its own composition, and this is very important for the next part to succeed. So if you have an object that you want to circle with particles, like we are going to do in this case, just make sure to place this layer in its own comp, which should be the same width and height, so the same dimensions as the comp that you are working with. Alright, and now the fun part. Let's go to the Effect menu, and under Simulation, I'll add the CC Particle World Effect. And this is the secret. The effect should be applied to the layer itself. By default, it will give us this ridiculous fountain of lines of particles. But over here, I'm going to go to the Extras options, and I'm going to tick this one, Composite with Original. And this is going to bring back the main layer, the object. Now, it's difficult to see with these default settings, but those particles are in front and behind him. And to make it look more obvious, I'm going to first add more particles by changing the birth rate to, let's go with 10. And then I'm going to close these extras, open up the particle section. I'll change the particle type to faded sphere. And then I'll set the birth size to 0 and the depth size to 2. I'll return to these values and animate them in a moment. But for now, let's just set the size variation to 100, which is the maximum. And then for the birth color, I will set it to white. And the death color, I'm just going to click on it and set the hue to 200, the saturation to 35, and the brightness to 15 to create some sort of a smoke. And you may already see that the particles are being generated in front and behind of this guy. Now, to make it more obvious, I'm going to close the particle section, open up the physics section, and I'll change the animation kind from the default explosive to twirly. And this is going to create some sort of a vortex around him. I'll change the velocity, which is the speed, to 0.6, and then I'll set the gravity to negative 0.03. And obviously I have some experience with this file, and this is why I'm giving you those values. But you can experiment with whatever you want to create the look that you are after. I'm going to continue and set the extra to 0.3, and then I'm going to go to the beginning and just show you how this works. Now, it looks kind of strange right now. Again, I will return to some of those values and animate them, but before doing so, I'll open up the producer and I'll change some of its settings. So I'll start by changing the position X. I just want to drag it so it will be on top of this guy, as well as the position Y. In this case, I just want to drag it to the floor, and you can already see that it is going to work. You can see that particles are being generated in front and behind this guy. So let's set it to 0.04 in this case. I'm going to leave the position Z alone. And then for the radius X, I'm going to reduce it to 0.01. And for the radius Y, I actually want this value to encompass the entire object. So in my case, 0.3. For the radius Z, I'll set it to 0.1, and I'll preview it from the beginning. Now, as you can see, particles are being generated from the start, so we have nothing over here, and I actually want to start with some particles on top of him, so to obscure him and to create this effect as if this is a revealer, so not to show him at the beginning of the composition. And this is why I have those two markers, because I want to select the guitarist and its shadow and move them so this marker is going to align to the beginning of the composition. So the particles are going to start over there. And now I'm going to animate a few of the settings here. So I'll pause the playback. Let's go over here to 8 seconds. And I'm going to open up the particle section and animate the depth size. I'll create a keyframe over here. I'll set it to 0. So we won't see any particles over here. Then I'll go to the beginning of my timeline and bring it back to 2. And then I'll animate the velocity and the extra angle. So at the beginning, I'll create keyframes for the velocity as well as the extra angle. And this is going to give us more revolutions. And once we are going to turn on motion blur, you will see how this works. So let's go to 6 seconds in this case. And I'll change the velocity to something lower, so 0.2. And the extra angle, I'm just going to add another 2 revolutions. And now, if I'm going to play it from the beginning, you can get a sense of how this looks. We will see a cloud of particles being generated around this actor, or this guitarist, I would say, and then they are slowly going to dissipate. Now, the magic will happen once we are going to enable motion blur, because CC particle world can react to the native motion blur inside After Effects. So I'll tick the motion blur settings. It will automatically enable the motion blur switch on top of the composition. And now if I'm just going to play you the last part over here, you can see how nice those particles are going to be smeared. And this is it. This is the main thing. So to just dress it up a little bit more nicer with more layers, I'll pause the playback over here. I'll click on the shy switch to show you that I have few more layers. I have another version of some small particles, which is exactly the same, although they are not animated. And the result of them, just to show you from the beginning, is that we'll have more particles which continue to dance after the main vortex has dissipated or disappeared. So this is on their own, and this is 2 of them together. All right, I'm just going to pause the playback over here. Let's go all the way to the end. And I'll also expose the text here. And the text is being matted with another version of the guitarist with its particles. The difference here is that I moved this a little bit to the left. So at the beginning, it is obscuring the text completely. And then you can see slowly the text comes to its full opacity. And the opacity is also flickering because this text has a glow effect. And inside the glow intensity, I've added a wiggle expression just to show you for the intensity of the glow. All right, on top of everything, if I'll go to the beginning, I have an adjustment layer with a simple dolly animation, basically just scaling into the composition to add some extra motion. And finally, I've also created some sound effects. So I'll turn on the speaker for this layer, and then I'll maximize the composition panel and preview everything in concert. So this is it, a single tick box on the extras option of the CC particle world effect that makes all the difference. Now, although this effect is 3D aware, this trick won't make the layer that is sandwiched between the particles 3D. So if you'll add a camera and then orbit around the scene, the layer stays 2D and always look towards the camera. But the particles that are being generated are in 3D space. So this is a drawback of this technique, and you'll need to be mindful when you are using this. This is a bit of a limitation. But even though I still think it's a small price to pay and the result look quite impressive. Best of all, this doesn't cost you anything. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this video, you know what to do, so please do it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time.